Pod SaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in SaaSy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Welcome to another episode of Pod SaaS. Today we have Tom Hessen from 9Lenses. How's it going, Tom?
I'm doing great. It's Friday. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Yeah, it's a Friday. It's a nice day out here in LA. Where are you guys based out of?
I'm in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Oh, nice. How's the weather out there now?
It's actually getting warmer. So not LA weather yet, but it's not frozen. So that's good.
Got it. So as we just kind of like chatted and alluded to earlier, like before we hopped on this, is you're not the typical CEO story in the sense that you kind of worked your way through and becoming CEO of 9Lenses, but you're not necessarily a founder. So I think it's a unique story. I think it's something that there's a lot of other people in those positions where they're looking to aim to kind of get to that C-suite role, and we'd love to hear more about your path and journey to getting there. But before we do all that, let us know what 9Lenses is, just a quick elevator pitch, and then who the target customer really looks like for you guys.
Sure. So 9Lenses, we are a SaaS sales platform. And so what I like to say is we turn sales teams into trusted advisors. And so, as you know, most people don't buy from people they don't trust. Trust is a critical part, especially in selling something complex, whether it be a complex product or complex service. And so we help our sales teams become trusted advisors. And we do that through three simple things. One is we help our customers assess their customers, right? So if you think about a sales process, you have to ask them a lot of questions. You have to understand their pain points, all that kind of stuff. So our clients build assessment tools on our platform that guides the understanding of the customer's pain points. And then we also through our platform, educate the buyer and their needs, what their biggest gaps are, what they can do to get better, some recommendations, comparison to benchmarks. And then we guide the sales rep on how to navigate the conversation with their buyer. So if they're not doing well in this area, ask these questions, talk about these case studies, pitch these products. So it's essentially just a way to educate the customer about their problems and then guide the rep on how to navigate the conversation. So when those two people come together, it's a magical conversation.
Got it. And so who is there like a particular type of vertical that you guys target, or is it any kind of like sales teams?
Yeah, it's not vertically aligned, but it's selling to sales teams that are selling a complex product or service. Okay. So we sell to other SaaS companies that are selling, a complex software product to the enterprise generally, or a big company that's selling a complex service. So a lot of service providers like consultants, management consultants, are clients of ours that are selling, very big ticket service projects that need to educate the customer, take them through a journey of what they need, why they need it. Here's how we can help you solve that problem. So we just help streamline that process for our customers.
Got it. So like high ticket ACVs, you're talking like 6-figure plus deals. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about that because it feels like your background is so aligned with what the product is. So, so it's almost like, it feels like it's going to be like almost like an ML or AI version of kind of like what you're, all the learnings that you've gone through as a sales professional, kind of like a sales guru. So cool. Love to hop into like just the quick rapid fire questions. Again, nothing crazy, just to get to know you a little bit better as a person. We love to put a personality behind everything. So if you're ready to kick things off, we're ready to get things started.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. Do you have a favorite entrepreneur or startup story?
So I have a really cool startup story that I read about. It's not my own personal. I got plenty of startup stories myself, but one that always stuck out at me was the TiVo DVR box back in the day when TiVo was made. It revolutionized the TV viewing experience. It's like you could pause sports, right? That was, I'm a sports guy. Pausing sports was, inconceivable, right? Growing up as a kid. And I read about the TiVo team, and they built this box that had 1,000,001 features in it. And it was like a $600-700 box or even more. It was so expensive because they jammed so much stuff into this box. And they realized no one's going to buy this device. And so they realized they stripped out all this stuff and they kept one feature which was pausing live TV. And that was the genesis of the DVR. And so I just think that's such a cool story because, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we want to just do more and more and more, and we lose sight of simplicity and just solving one problem and doing it incredibly well. And TiVo did, solved one problem really, really well.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great, unique story. I haven't heard that one yet. Cool. What did you, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years old, what did you aspire to be as a kid?
I remember, I have kids myself, and I have conversations like this with my own kids, and they were asking me the other day, like, what did I want to be when I was a kid? And, I don't remember, like, in elementary school what I wanted to be. I know I wanted to be a doctor at one point, and maybe in high school, but then I realized, blood and biology, and like you take biology class and man, you either love it or you hate it. And I didn't particularly like it. So I realized pretty quickly, the doctor path is probably not mine. So that's my only real memory, is like aspiring to be a specific profession.
Yeah. I think I had that same feeling, and I can still, when you brought that up, I got some like olfactory senses back to like the formaldehyde of like dissecting, the frogs like for a split second. And that was like, oh no, I'm good. I'm not going to do that. That's a different path.
I had a couple of, I don't like that experiences, in early jobs too, that helped guide the way as to what I did like and didn't like. So it wasn't clear. Like I wish it was a lot earlier, but it wasn't that clear.
That's awesome. Okay. Next question is about most painful experience, but to give it a little bit of context, it can be personal, professional, but I think like a lot of growth tends to happen from uncomfortable situations or being like kind of like boxed into a corner, right? And then fighting your way out, and it's a learning exercise. So has there been any kind of like experience that you've gone through where you felt like, super uncomfortable or even painful that, changed your perspective, and just made you a better person or, a better leader?
Yeah, I've been through a couple, and, mainly in the work front. And so like at 9Lenses, I had a particular challenge where I was brought in as the vice president of sales after the founder raised a bunch of investment capital. And turned out we didn't really have product market fit. So it's hard to sell anything if you don't have a particular product that solves a problem that the market is trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
And so I was a first-time VP of sales. And so, the first thing that goes when sales isn't going well is the head of sales.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's well documented. I mean, and I don't blame anybody for it. I mean, that's the first lever you pull is, let's switch out. And especially as a first-time VP of sales, I mean, there's good questions as like, is Tom the right guy, right? And you could argue I wasn't the right guy, but we weren't selling anything because we just didn't have product market fit. So I had to end up interviewing my replacement. And so we would bring in VP candidates and I would interview them, and because I was committed to the team. And so I ended up going back as an individual contributor, meaning I went back to a sales guy as some new person came in. And that was a difficult moment because you realize, okay, maybe I'm not up for it. Maybe I'm not a VP of sales. Like there's a lot of things to question when startups don't grow like they are expected to. Yeah. And so, clarity comes with time, but at that time it was unclear what was the issue. Was it Tom? Was it the product? Was it the message? Was it, this, that, or something else? But at that time it was hard to, to go through that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think especially, a lot of professionals, tie their personal identity to a certain degree to what you do for a living, right? So it's like, it does force that question. I mean, I know like yesterday I had a different guest on who was talking about that too. Just the idea of how much we associate to some of those experiences and professionally. And it is somewhat of a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
And I did not realize that until, so I was the first startup I was a part of. I was there for 14 months. I just came out of business school, and it was in 2008 and 2009 when the whole market was collapsing, and, Bear Stearns was, going out of business, yeah. And real estate values were crashing, and the whole mortgage mess. And so after 14 months, the company was sold.
Yeah.
And, basically 3 days after the company was sold, the company that acquired the business laid off half of the staff. And, here I was, I feel pretty prideful or accomplished getting laid off, right? Just because it was a business decision. It wasn't about, Tom. It was just like they were getting rid of all the sales teams. And so I was just kind of washed out. And so I was unemployed for 3 months in a very bad job market back in 2009. So I was fearful kind of just where I was going to go. But just being empathetic to people that have been laid off. I always used to think about like, oh, they did something wrong, right? Like people don't get laid off if they're good, right? Or something like that. And that's during those 3 months, that's when I realized my identity really was tied to my job. And I had never, until you are separated from that, you don't know how tied it is. So, I mean, exactly what you were saying, and I experienced that firsthand. So as I've had to lay people off, in my career, I certainly have compassion on what they have to go through as a family, individually, et cetera. And oftentimes it's not because of performance, it's because of, changing business dynamics or whatever it may be.
Sure. Yeah, that's it is a tough experience to do and go through, but I've heard like the idea that was like hire fast, fire faster kind of thing, which is like, if you know from the get-go that's not going to be a fit, or as soon as you can identify that's not going to be a fit, let the other person know as quickly as possible. But it's definitely not an easy experience to go through, and it's a skill set that I've definitely yet to, I think, like finesse, so it's hard.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah. That said, like what kind of like motivated you in those moments? The question is like what motivates you in the 25th hour, but like even in those moments, right, where it's like you are maybe like second guessing yourself a little bit, you still have to persevere and you still have to go forward, but there's options, right? There's things that run through your mind. I mean, maybe I don't work for this company anymore, or I, go look for a different type of field, I mean, what kind of, obviously you did persevere. You're now, in the position that you're in, but looking back at that time period, was there anything that kind of like helped push you through?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like perseverance is required in startups just because, it's such a roller coaster and it can drive you crazy. And even at different stages, it's tricky. And I feel, I have had to persevere, and I feel like I was brought to 9Lenses. I felt like the doors kind of opened up, and, back when I came in that very first day, 8 years ago, I felt like I was called to be there. And despite, getting demoted and kind of going through all of that stuff, I still felt like I was supposed to be there. And so I kind of stuck there and weathered the storm. And I had no idea I was eventually going to become elevated to the CEO. I had no idea at the time. But yeah, perseverance is the key part of my story. Certainly at 9Lenses, I think I am, have some ability to kind of stomach some of that stuff. I certainly accept stress just like everybody else, but it certainly paid off, and it's still, I still persevere every day, right? Yep. Just like there's still things going on in the business. I mean, there's never, I've made it. At least I haven't been there yet. I mean, maybe somewhere or someday I'll feel like, okay, I can take a deep breath, but I feel like I persevere every day, just trying to overcome the, nobody knows who you are. You're pushing a rock uphill, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, are there any things that you do, outside of work to kind of decompress or get away from that stress?
Yeah. So one thing I've done better is exercise, right? Because I just realized like stress does take a physical toll.
Yeah.
And, I was a number 2 in a company prior to 9Lenses, but there's a difference between number 2 and number 1.
Yeah.
Right. And so I didn't fully appreciate that. And you can't, they say like the president's like the loneliest job in the world, like President of the United States. I mean, I can't imagine the pressure that role.
Yeah.
But there's still pressure that comes with being the CEO, and I could see like my sleep just wasn't as good as it used to be, and just needing to exercise to kind of burn off that stress. So I've had to be much more mindful about physical, exercise and health, and so that was one thing that I continue to do. I mean, I have a family, and we enjoy a lot of different things. I coach basketball, I coach all my kids. So there's a lot of avenues I have outside of work. I try not to work around the clock. I mean, that's not a good life for anybody, me included. And so I do try to spend a lot of time with my family, and get involved. Like coaching is kind of my
that's awesome.
My big thing with my kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're just talking about the idea of taking on the CEO role, and it is very different being a number one versus a number two in that situation. So, has there been any skill that you've picked up along the way in that new role that you've like loved or hated? Because obviously, once you kind of get to that place, you're wearing a lot of hats, or you're learning a lot on the job, and yeah, you're basically going to be testing different traits that you didn't know existed, or you have to build and adapt to. Anything that you've like really picked up on that you didn't expect to, but found some kind of strong emotional relationship with?
Well, I think I looked at the team differently, just the people on the team, because in my experience in other startups, how much is driven of the culture from the CEO, good or bad, right? It just takes the shape of the CEO, and how they communicate or how they interact with people, and what do you let slide, what do you not let slide, what are you reinforcing? So I became much more conscious of what my actions were and how they were impacting the others. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I would be like, okay, I don't want to yell at this person because I'm angry, right? I can be angry, but not yell at them, because that's not going to help anybody. It may make me feel good in that moment, but it's not going to make them feel good, and it's not going to leave us in a better position, right? So just being much more conscious of, communicating, connecting with the team, not just being, I can be all business all the time, right? I can talk shop all day and never really kind of like wade into how's your weekend? What did you do? What do you got going on? How were the kids? Like I just have to be mindful of just connecting on those different levels, and just being much more mindful of the people element, and kind of how I interact with others, because it does set a tone, and it sets a culture.
Yeah, for sure. Two quick questions around that. One would be, was there any book that you've read or any advice that you got from advisors or mentors that kind of helped you through that process, or guide you through that process of being more cognizant of team, the idea of building culture, that kind of stuff? Because those are some things that I think are like the intangibles that are one of the biggest things to pick up on once you move into that number one role, where you're starting to manage people and personalities more than anything else, and trying to figure out how you can maximize productivity while keeping people inspired and motivated.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any one thing. I mean, I do read a lot, and it's just something you become aware of, right? Yeah. And you're just thinking about like, I started asking questions like, is this person going to stay, or is this person going to leave? Is this person worth keeping? Is this person not worth keeping? Like, these were questions I never would ask myself until I became, the team lead and the CEO, and started to look at them differently. And, am I, the value of that person, how do I treat that person given their value vis-a-vis others, and so on? So it just become a big part of the job, just the people side of it. Mm-hmm. And so I just had to kind of learn, and I'm, still learning. There's no destination there, but I think it's just, you just got to continue to grow. And I've certainly grown in this area, because in my career, I haven't led a lot of big teams. It's, I've been in a bunch of small companies, and not always did I have direct reports. And so now kind of managing the team and getting the team to perform together, I played a lot of sports, so I kind of know what that looks like. But in a business context, and having one-on-ones versus team meetings and so on. So I think it's been something I've learned as I go. And you can just see how people react. I mean, if you just stop and think about how are these people reacting to me, you can see, and there's a lot of things I can or can't do to either escalate things or de-escalate things. Right. And you could dress somebody down, or you could just say, hey, you know what, handle the situation. Just, that didn't go well. I need you to do this better, and not scream and shout. Right. Like, is that just, and it's, kind of like maybe being a parent has helped in that regard too. Because sometimes you're like just at wit's end, you want to like scream at your kids for like not putting your shoes away for the 1,000th time, but yelling at them is not going to change it, right? So it's so I don't know if that's like answers your question, but it's just like being able to control your emotions and being able to relate that to others and how they receive it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I think that's important, and it's I think it's also something that comes also with experience and age and just going through different phases of life, and it helps you be more I think just aware of the environment and people. In relation to that, like, how valuable is EQ in your opinion, and do you guys use any kind of like measuring of that in the hiring process as part of like building the team, building the culture?
I think it's very important, because you can, if you interact with a lot of people, you see different skill sets all the time. Right. And so like, we just hired for a role that is customer facing, and we know how important it is to build good relationships with your customers. And there's just some default things you have to do well, right? Like, you just have to be able to connect. You at least like them to want to like you. How you communicate with them over the the phone, over the Zoom, over email. There's just ways to do it well, and there's ways not to do it well. And so we were specifically looking for, what's this person going to be like in front of a customer, right? And how are they going to interact? And so we didn't like test it per se, like hire, some sort of EQ test of some kind, but it's definitely something we were, specifically in that role. And obviously you're a verse software developer, their level of EQ may be different than someone that's customer facing. So it's kind of have to be role specific. But yeah, we certainly are mindful, and how we relate to each other. Like, we spend so much time together. Like, the last thing you want is to have someone that's either miserable or, a Debbie Downer or a jerk or, or worse. And so like, life's too short to work with people like that. So we're very mindful of, how is a new hire going to impact the existing team? Because the last thing you want to do is throw a grenade into a small team and blow the whole thing up.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question here before kind of like going to your journey, but what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind? Another way of putting it is kind of like, the impact that you want to leave on this world.
Oh man, that's a big question. I mean, I think it just starts with like family, right? Yeah. Like the impact my kids are going to walk away with, because no one's going to remember me often, like it's the people that I'm surrounded with the most, right? It's my kids, my siblings, their kids, my nieces and nephews. So, I mean, I don't want to get too sappy on me here, but it's just, it's an important thing. And, and obviously you want them to be, I want them to learn, right? I'd love to teach them, I'd love to set an example, like being a hard worker, loving your family, loving your wife, being there for your friends, investing in the things that you care about, because again, you can invest all your time into this job, right? But what's that going to get you? Maybe it'll get you some success, but that's fleeting. You're not going to care about that on your deathbed. So there's just things that, we prioritize as a family that we invest our time into at the cost of other things. And so I want to make sure that they see that as important too.
Good answer. Yeah, I like that answer. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I think I'd love to now just kind of talk about your journey to CEO of 9Lenses, because I looked up your LinkedIn, saw a very sales heavy background, and then you also talked about a little bit coming in as like a VP of sales, then being demoted, but then now you're CEO. Like, how does that happen? And before we kind of get to 9Lenses, and you also spoke about that affinity towards feeling like that's where you needed to be. I mean, that's a unique situation, especially what you went through in that experience. So talk a little bit about right out of college, what you did, and then how'd you found your way into sales.
So I was bit by the entrepreneurial bug in college.
Okay.
And so my senior year, my college buddy and I, we had to do the senior project, and we could pretty much do whatever we wanted to do. And, we ended up wanting to develop some software, and we wanted to play some free golf because we played golf. So we said, why don't we build some tee time reservation software, make that our senior project, and maybe we'll get some free golf at like the local country club, because we'll have to go down there and interview, and there'll be our subject matter experts and all that kind of stuff. So long story short, we did that. We built some really bad software, but we tried selling it. And so we kind of became a business. Thankfully, we didn't sell it because the software was terrible. But, that's when I got bit by the bug. And this was in 2000, right? 2001, when like the first .com boom was going crazy.
Yeah.
And so, that's when I wanted to be, an entrepreneur and start my own business. And, but right out of college, my first job was the exact opposite of that, was with Accenture, which is a, Fortune 500 management consulting firm, technology consulting firm. And I loved it. I was there for 5.5 years. And, started to really develop my love for technology, and recognized that I was not going to be a programmer. My skill set was more communicating with people and customers and being able to talk technology, but not go off and develop it. Mm-hmm. And so, I was there for 5.5 years, and that's when I was, I tried to start a couple businesses on the side that didn't really pan out too well, but, I was still trying to be the entrepreneur on the side while I was in this kind of big corporate job. And I got married and then decided to go back to business school. And that was my bridge. I was like, okay, if I'm going to get into startups, you just can't go from like Fortune 500 to startup, right? Because like when you go to a startup, you're like, well, are you going to sell the software? Are you going to develop the software? Are you going to support the software? And no one's going to hire you as a VP of anything, right? So like I had to figure out what size of company can a young kid like me get into. And so I spent a little bit of time while I was in business school interning as a VC. At a VC firm. And this was a tremendous experience because there's a lot of cool factor with venture capitalists. And, and when you're inside of a VC firm, I was like, part of my job was as an intern was to try to go call CEOs to like source deals, right? So I was like a sales guy, like knock on doors. And then I realized just how hard it was for them to put money to work, right? Meaning like how many deals do they have to see in order to actually make an investment?
Yeah.
It was really, really hard. I mean, it's like they may do 3-4 deals a year.
Yeah.
Despite looking at business plans, all the time. And it was really a finance job. And one of the founders of this firm, who's still a good friend, as I was talking about, well, should I be a VC? Should I go into startups? And he said, you know what, go work for a startup. And, we talked about being CEOs. And if you want to be a CEO, you got to go into sales. That was his advice. And he was a former CEO who came up through sales, had tons of success, and then, went on to start this VC firm. And so I was like, okay, so I'll go I'll go join a startup. And I went to join a software company that they had invested in. So that was my first job at a business school. It was a company called Everest Software. And it was a $10 million ERP software company. And I joined in a business development role, which is they had sold their software to a bunch of customers, but they wanted to find other products to sell to those customers. So my job was to go out, find other products that we could then sell through our sales team to that customer base. And so they had just brought in a new CEO to grow it. And so he was the one who hired me. And that's where I was for 14 months until, they sold the company in 2019. And then we all got laid off, right after the acquisition. So that was my first kind of venture funded software company. It was a great experience, even though the company went through some difficult times there with the economy, but it was great for me because I was not, I didn't report to the CEO. I was like level 3, I guess you could say. And because the business was going through some challenging times with the economy, a lot of that leadership team was let go. So it compressed. So I got a whole lot closer to the CEO because the whole company kind of contracted a little bit. Yeah. And so I got to see and do a lot of different things. And you'll see this is a consistent theme. The next job, I went to another startup after getting laid off, and there's 8 of us. I was running sales, running marketing. I was doing finance. I was running payroll. I was, training the software. There was just so many different things I did. Yeah. Right. And I was there for a bunch of years, but 4 or 5 years growing this little software company, selling into law enforcement of all places. Wow. Which is something I knew nothing about. But it was the opportunity in 2019 to stay in software, stay in a startup in the midst of, that crazy time period. And I'll just take a breath there. But so that was my first transition from business school to a $10 million software company to one that was much, much smaller, and being a jack of all trades. Yeah.
Yep. So then you're there at the smaller startup for, you said like 4 years, 5 years?
4 years. Okay. It was 4 years almost to the day. And we grew that business. I was working with a CEO. And again, that was kind of a unique situation. He was brought in to turn this company around. And I was his first hire, I want to say. And there was a lot of stuff that needed to be cleaned up. And we had to figure out the product, the market, and we did grow the company successfully. The challenge was, not a lot of investment dollars go into companies selling to law enforcement, the niche market. Yeah. So it was hard for us to grow. We didn't have, we couldn't go raise, $10 million to go hire a bunch of sales and marketing resources. So we were just kind of like growing a little bit year over year. So successful, but it was like, okay, once you do that 3-4 years, there's like, what's another year at 20% growth, right? It's just pretty much the same. And so that's when I got a call from the founder at 9Lenses and said, hey, we just raised our A round. I want you to come run the sales team. Got it. And so that was kind of the transition. The law enforcement software company got acquired like maybe 3, 4, 5 months after I left. So it was a great outcome, kind of validated all the hard work that we did. It was from a competitor that was tired of seeing us and just said, we're just going to buy you guys and make you part of the company. And so that was great to see, 4 years of hard work, produce the value. I mean, even though I didn't participate, in the value capture side of it, I created the value, but they, it demonstrated like I had the skills to help grow a business. Yeah, for sure. So then you get hired by 9Lenses by the CEO, the founder at the time, right? And how again, it boggles my mind, kind of like that experience of like when you came in, how long were you like the VP of sales before they're like, hey, we're not selling anything. This might be, an issue with you trying to find a hire, and then you going through that experience of them being demoted, and like, how long are these phases, and then ultimately getting past that point? And let's talk about that first. And then obviously I think the other part of it would be like understanding product market fit and how did you guys end up getting there, because that unlocks a lot of things for sales teams. So yeah, I think that's almost everything for startup. Yeah. So I would say maybe I was the VP of sales for a year, maybe a little bit more, something like that. Yeah. And, so I hired some people and, we grew the team and, we were getting a lot of great meetings, but no one really knew what to do with the software. They go, that's cool. I have no idea what to do with it. And so, these are hardest things for startups is to kind of figure out, like you build a product with certain assumptions baked in, you just don't know which assumptions are right and which ones are wrong. And so, we just couldn't, find the problem that we were best suited to solve. And so when that happens, it's like, you just can't create the pipeline, you can't close the deals. And, when you take money from a venture capital firm, like there's, you've got a model, like you've got like, hey, in this amount of time, I'm going to hit this, and this, and here's my plan. And we weren't hitting the plan. Right. And then you start asking a bunch of questions like, well, is it the product? Is it the message? Is it the leader? Is it the, this, that, and the other? And so those are all natural questions because you got to solve it quickly. Right.
Sure.
I mean, so the founder is a great friend of mine. Just had lunch with him yesterday. And so it's not like I didn't take it. I mean, I guess I took it personally a little bit, but I also knew that what else are you going to do? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so many levers to pull at that point. And so, sure, I'm sure my pride was hurt and I didn't like it, but I didn't fault him because, I mean, again, what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
So then, I mean, and he was always accustomed to always bringing in people from the outside. So we meet with all sorts of interesting people because he's always trying to upskill talent, the team, bring in, athletes, right, that could help the team, right? And so it wasn't atypical for us to meet with people in a variety of capacities.
Okay.
And so like at one point it's like, okay, well, we're gonna, hire a VP of sales and Tom, we want you to be part of the interview committee, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, the company, the situation. And so again, I swallowed my pride and wanted to do what was right for the company, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't about me. It was about what was right for him, the company, the team. And, so we ended up hiring a VP and sales didn't materially change.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, looking back now, it's like, product market fit just wasn't there. And so we tried and we changed the product and it's hard. I mean, those are hard years. For sure. I think one of the hardest things in a startup is going sideways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I've seen companies go through that too, where they have to pivot product. And it's like, it is somewhat representative, I think, of, the founders that they have to take onus over that entire thing. And, sometimes it's hard for them to have that visibility. It's difficult. I think there's a unique situation where there's a company that I was working with, and they're in very much that similar situation where we were being able to generate a bunch of meetings for them with their target personas and all that kind of stuff, 10 a week ultimately. And like, these are 6-figure ACV deals and none of it's closing. And so, I think to this particular, founder, I think like I give him a lot of credit because he saw this and he literally in 3 months changed and pivoted the product, 6 months, pivoted the product based on the learnings that they're getting from there and realized, well, this is what we're solving for. It's like a 1 or 2 on a pain scale of 5, right? And 5 being extreme pain. And so they're not going to pay for this. But they did discover in those conversations what people would pay for. They pivoted the business in 6 months, got to $1 million in ARR in 6 months, rehired us. We got them the same amount of meetings. They started closing higher volume, raised a $16 million Series A. And I think they did it in a fairly quick time. This was his second startup, so he did exit one before. So I think like a little bit more experience in the sense of like, okay, remove the ego, remove everything from this. What is the customer telling us? What are these personas telling us? Right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard journey, and I've seen, to this founder's point, I mean, like, to be able to still turn it around though it's hard because a lot of startups will just go down, like it'll burn out, and that's the end of the day. Like they'll continue to try to squeeze a square peg into a round hole as opposed to like iterating. And so I think like in this situation, it does speak volumes to being able to do that. And I think it's an interesting story that's not also spoken about a lot in terms of like how do you go through that pivot process to get to product market fit, because that's the most critical part of everything. And there's a lot of times it's just personalities that get in the way of getting there sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll tell you our story in a second of how we figured that out. But, what ended up happening was, the founder of 9Lenses, he was a CEO prior to starting 9Lenses. He was like a hired gun, turnaround CEO. And, so there was a real opportunity cost for him staying at 9Lenses because he could go out and, be hired to run a, $100 million company, like at any moment. And so, he had an opportunity to, go lead another, to turn around or lead or grow a much, much bigger company. And he ended up doing that and leaving 9Lenses, and 9Lenses was going to be acquired by that company. But as part of this whole crazy transaction, he was going to go to be the CEO, and 9Lenses was going to be acquired. And, he ended up being the CEO, but the founder of that company squashed the deal of the acquisition. So 9Lenses was kind of left as a standalone company. Yeah. And so at that point, the board had to put somebody in charge. And so I was, the one who brought in the vast majority of our customers. And so they're like, okay, we'll give you a chance. And again, the founder, I think, recommended me as well. And so like I was in the position, but the board was like, we're not going to give you the CEO title. You're like the interim leader. I don't know what my title was. I'm just kind of like interim guy. And that was hard because like the first thing I had to do was like, at that point it's like you have like the place is on fire, the founder leaves, Tom's running the team, and the board is now recognizing they're probably never gonna get their money back, right? They're investors. And so one of the biggest challenges I had to do was like, how do you break the company even so the board doesn't have to put any more money in the company and they're investors? And so that was really tricky. This is, over 4 years ago. And, so my task was like, I have to reduce a ton of costs to break the company even. So again, the first thing I had to do on the job was lay people off. Yeah. Right. Which was not great, but very necessary, and figure out what the business is going forward. And that took some time. But that was kind of that's how I became CEO. Was kind of accidental, unintended, or, opportunistic. I think becoming a hired CEO for the first time is not, it's like, how do you get the chance, right? I mean, how do you become the CEO for the first time? It's in at least my case, it was out of kind of a bizarre set of circumstances. And I was the best candidate for the job.
Wow. So you like inherit like a burning building. You have to put out the fire, and then you have to rebuild the building in order for it to get to better, more pristine condition. So how do you go about doing that? Because that seems like, I think probably like the bigger story here.
The good Lord was watching. So what, the plan I built, because again, I didn't have any secret insight that like, that I didn't share before. It's like, I didn't know. So I had to pick a direction, I had to create a plan and said, okay, this is the direction we're going. Well, that direction didn't work either. Right. And so, because what we had like a handful of customers that all did different things. So nothing was scalable. Like nothing was repeatable. We had some random customers doing different things. Nothing was scalable. Nothing was repeatable. And then one day we had a prospect come in through our website, and I scheduled a meeting with them. And they're like, hey, we want to build this assessment and we want to put it on our website, and we want to drive traffic to the website. And we want people to take this assessment. We want them to get an instant set of recommendations based on their scores. And we want the hot lead, right? And we would then, knowing their business pain, be able to have a better sales conversation. That's what we want to do. I was like, no one said that to us before. And we had just built this feature to at least enable what they wanted to do. So they bought, and this is like a top tier marketing consulting firm. And so, a couple months later, I got a meeting with the head of marketing and their head of sales. I'm like, so how's this assessment on your website going? And their reaction just blew me away. They're like, these are the best leads that we ever could get. They're coming to our site. They're answering all these questions about their business. We're teaching them on what they should do based on their problems. We now know what their problems are. And so when we talk to them, it's like a magical conversation. And I knew on that one call, that was the future of the business. Yeah. And ever since then, we've been learning. We've been, we pivoted, but again, it's we're still building that out, years later. But I knew that, at that moment, that was something that we could scale. Other sales leaders, other marketing leaders would have a desire to, have better sales conversations, have more sales ready leads, that's just a no-brainer. How it looked and how we got there and how do you tell the story, and those are all things we continue to evolve on. But that was when the light bulb turned on.
That's awesome. How long ago was that?
That was in the beginning of 2019.
Okay.
And so
awesome.
Ever since then, that business has continued to grow. It's completely transformed our business. We're now selling to sales, marketing, and customer success. And the types of tools that our clients are building on our platform just blow me away. Our technology's gotten better. So product market fit is everything, right? And so I never knew what it was like to have wind at your back. I was always running into the headwind. And so having some wind at your back, and you're like, oh, they've got that problem too. And oh, they're going to actually buy. And oh, they're renewing a year later. It's just, it's amazing what product market fit can do. Yeah,
for sure. Cool. So I think that's a great story. Before we wrap things up here, because we're kind of hitting the top of the hour, is that just one more quick question. 5 years from now, where do you imagine 9Lenses being? Do you foresee an exit opportunity, or do you feel like this is something that has a huge amount of potential to grow and you want to see it all the way through, another 10, 15 years? Because it seems like, you fairly recently just got to that product market fit and you now have that wind on your back. That momentum can last you for 5, 10, 15 years. And, what do you kind of
15 seems like a really long time. I do think, enduring all that I've endured to get to this point, it feels like, why stop now? Right? Why not try to get further? And so right now I'm actively trying to raise growth capital, because now that we've gotten 3 years of great growth around this new pivot. And now it's like, okay, nobody cares about the old 9Lenses. They can now see the new story, right? Because again, there's baggage, right? Investors don't like baggage, right? So now we've got a new story. I am trying to raise growth capital to hire and invest in sales and marketing to go tell that story. So I do think there's plenty of legs with 9Lenses. There should be an exit somewhere. Just at what point, right, is the right time to either me or the investors to go down that path. It's yet to be seen. But it's exciting. To kind of get here and see happy customers and people now saying, hey, I want to do this. We think you're the best that does it. That's the pride part of just seeing this whole thing through. No matter where it gets, I feel like it's already a success. It's not a financial success yet until we continue to grow and make the investors whole and whatnot. But just to getting it to this point is impressive in my book.
Yeah, and to me too. It's a great turnaround story, and it speaks a lot, in terms of your ability to identify what the market actually needed. So. Congratulations on success so far, and then finding that fit, because it's really hard. I've been there. I know how hard it is, and we've talked to plenty of founders where it can be very challenging. So best of luck. Thank you for spending the time with us today, and then just sharing your unique story to kind of becoming the CEO. Definitely one of the more interesting conversations.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Let's try to do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Thank you so much. And best of luck, Tom.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.